Hey, everybody, it's Congressman Jamie Raskin coming to you from the Rayburn House Office Building. Hello to all my friends out in Maryland's beautiful 8th Congressional District and beyond in Maryland and our followers around the country who love Local Hero. It's my favorite time of the week when we get to profile and interact with the people who make our community such an extraordinary place to live. I'm coming to you today, Friday, June 9th, on this climate emergency day where it's very tough to be outside. Please make sure you're wearing your masks if you do go outside. We're celebrating Pride Month, and with me today is our local hero, Lee Blinder. They are the founding executive director of Trans Maryland and a co-founder of the Maryland Trans Resilience Conference. Lee is the policy chair for the Maryland Commission on LGBTQIA+ affairs. They sit on the LGBTQIA+ advisory boards around the state. And in service to our trans and queer youth, Lee's the state policy fellow for GLSEN National. They are an openly non-binary, transgender, and queer Marylander. They've worked in service to our community for 26 years, helping launch the GSA at Montgomery Blair High School in 1996. They enjoy spending time with their adopted animal companions, both a cat, Basil Pasta Marinara, and Cupcake the dog. So Lee Blinder, look, thank you for everything you're doing as the executive director of Trans Maryland and everything you're doing as an activist in our community, and we salute you as a local hero this week.
Thank you so much, Congressman. It's really wonderful to be here, and I really appreciate you reminding everyone to wear their mask and stay safe. I appreciate that.
Well, look, we appreciate so much the work you've been doing. We know that all over the world, the authoritarians and the despots are at war with sexual minorities, but especially trans and non-binary people. They are very much focused on demonizing and vilifying this community. And so I'm proud that we live in a community and we live in a state which celebrates everybody's freedom to be exactly who they are. But we also know that there are some tough cross currents taking place in our own country. And I wonder if you would kick us off by saying something about what this general struggle is like over establishing trans rights and trans visibility at a time of so much backlash.
That's a really great question. So I've been, talking to our community and attempting, to support folks who are largely really afraid at this time. We have a lot of folks who are reading the news and seeing, our community attacked all around the country and of course around the world. And, there's a lot of stress that comes from reading information like that. And the encouragement that I find at such a stressful and difficult time is through talking to our elders who are trans and gender nonconforming, who have been doing this work in community for many, many years. They paved the way for us to, this is not true for everyone in our community, but for many of us, we can walk down the street and not worry about being arrested. For myself, I can move about in public space and not worry I'm going to be arrested for, violating these cross-dressing laws that used to be part of our world. So our elders can really, really guide us at such a stressful time. And I always like to take a quick moment to talk directly to trans people and those who are our loved ones as well, and who have folks that they're worried about, and say, it is probably going to be a really rough and brutal 10 years that we're in for. We, have a these stressful situations where our government is in many areas, not supportive and actively attacking us. And I think this is time for us to return to our roots, to connect in with elders and those folks who've been around for some time, and grow our community power We know that our rural trans folks and queer folks are extremely, extremely resilient, and folks are powerful and organizing in really exciting ways. They're supporting one another. We're returning to a lot of these networks we've had and built for many, many years to support one another. So really, really glad to see that. And I know that we will continue to take good care of each other as we always have. But to kind of speak to your question, I'm very grateful to be a Marylander. Just earlier this week, Governor Moore signed an executive order to protect Marylanders and then folks who are procuring healthcare in Maryland as well, and the providers who are also serving us to provide our healthcare. So we're really, really thrilled to have these kind of protections and to have an administration that's looking out for the community. We, were never at the table before, so it's very exciting to now, be at the table to get to have these conversations and to get to put forward our policy and needs agenda, which is really around existing in public space, taking care of one another. I guess that's an agenda. But yeah, we're quite thrilled and looking forward to continued collaboration, with the administration and also with our elected officials like yourself.
I saw former Congressman Barney Frank speak this morning at an event up on Capitol Hill, and he said something interesting, which is that the trans community is today where the gay lesbian community, the gay lesbian bisexual community was 30 years ago. But that statement gave me a lot of hope, really, because I remember, so clearly the struggle for gay civil rights and marriage equality, and how, to some people it was totally shocking and norm busting. But people wrapped their minds and their hearts around it, as more and more gay people came out. And so he made us think of it in that same perspective, that, trans people are now finding it safe to come out and to speak and to talk about who they are, and are facing the inevitable backlash, but still we're living in a time of great progress. And I just wonder if you agree with that general perspective on it.
Sure. So I came out for the first time 26 years ago. I usually share, actually, I turned 41 yesterday, and I usually share my age because I've been told I look quite young. But I say that just to give context on, where I fit my social location age-wise and the events of the time. So I definitely grew up without the belief that our community would have any of the rights that we have fought so long and hard to have now. I'm a queer person in addition to being transgender, and we have a lot of trans people who are lesbians and gay and bisexual as well. So kind of like how we've evolved our community and how we've evolved the process of fighting for our rights has been that we now have some space in order to work on the issues for trans people. And you're exactly right. A lot of folks are feeling a lot more comfortable to share who they are with others. I think sometimes there's this perspective that, we have more people now. No, we have more visible people now. And visibility, unfortunately, for many of our community members, comes with a really high price tag, including our lives. Our Black and Brown trans feminine largely community and trans women, but not exclusively, our Black trans masculine and trans male community, and our non-binary community, who are Black and Brown individuals, are also facing higher targeting, unfortunately, for their identities, and often ends up in loss of life. I'm a white trans person, I'm Jewish, those are some of the intersections of my identity. I'm also neurodiverse. So those are a few of the hats that I wear as an individual, in the spaces that I'm in. But my siblings are also, near and dear to me. And I also like to ensure that we're having these conversations about who is protected in our community, who is at risk. And some of that, that visibility, it can be really powerful. It can create space. It can create, this conversation where our young people, when I was growing up, again, there were no openly trans teachers, there were no openly queer teachers and people in my life. You know, it was really only, you know, folks not put in a positive light on maybe a TV show like Jerry Springer. You know, that was the only place trans people existed in my world. And so I really never saw what adulthood could possibly look like. And when I meet with our young folks that are GSAs in Montgomery County, they tell me that I'm the first openly trans person that they've met. And my heart breaks a little bit because I'm like, oh, you know, you're having this same experience that I did growing up here. And we work so hard to hope that our young folks weren't still going to have that experience. But what it says to me is that, you know, they're at a GSA, they're finding, you know, role models in TV and books and literature like we never had when I was growing up. So progress has been made, and our young folks are feeling, even in this climate, you know, where we have these national level and other state attacks on our community that are unfortunately sometimes still also occurring in Maryland and in Montgomery County. We can see with like the Board of Education, you know, protests that are going on. That was just earlier this week. But you know, our young people are, despite all of that, feeling comfortable to share themselves. And I'm so proud to spend time with them and to learn from them. You know, our young folks have a lot of wisdom and sometimes have, you know, been out in community longer than some of the folks who have a few more years on the planet. So there is, again, always an interplay of an exchange of information in community.
Yeah, I know that another thing that came up in this conversation with Congressman Frank was that when LGBT people first started coming out, the popular impression was, well, to be gay means to be an activist, because those were the only people who were really out speaking. But you're a trans person who's an activist, but for every one person in your situation, there's probably 10 or 20 or 30 who are just leading their lives, right? Who are not out campaigning to defend the rights of the community. And I'm just wondering whether you know, that kind of attention that you get because you're out there fighting is you know, a tough thing for you to hold.
Thank you for asking. I think, you know, I'm a deeply private person, and I wanted no part of this leadership. You know, for many years, you know, I was much more interested in being, you know, behind the scenes, not in the forefront. And what I really realized, again, through having these discussions, I had, you know, an amazing education at Montgomery County Public Schools. And, you know, that gave me a lot of skill set that I realized was important and needed for our community. You know, the ability to do public speaking, even if it makes me nervous, you know, the ability to confidently, you know, express our needs and our interests through, you know, written testimony. And, you know, now my ID is on the internet, redacted, of course, but to show folks that they can have an X marker ID after we passed the ID bill in Maryland in 2019, making gender self-select and adding X. I have my X passport on the internet as well to let folks know, hey, you can have this item. This is available to you and to our community.
And
And that
just to
was
be
so
clear, you're referring
sure.
to MX instead of Mr. or Ms. Is that right?
So that's an honorific. So MX is a title that's an honorific, like you said, instead of Mr. or Mrs. for folks who find that affirming. But this is actually on my Maryland state driver's license. I have an X gender marker. It's under the sex field. So that is my legal sex in Maryland is X. And also my legal sex for the United States on my passport is X. And I wanted folks in our community to know that that was accessible to them. So I think sometimes we're called to do things that are deeply uncomfortable. And my life motto is let's get uncomfortable. So, you know, for me, I'm like, hey, you know, let me dig down and find the chutzpah to do this. And sometimes you realize you're called to serve a purpose. And the folks before me I mean, our community's leadership and the folks who've pushed for change have not been the folks with the most. They've not been folks who are privately wealthy. They've not been folks who have everything handed to them. You know, when we're looking at the folks who pushed for change in our community, they've largely been Black and brown, working class white folks. And so, you know, when we think about how do we show up for our community and how can we, you know, make sure to take those actions, it becomes something that I, for myself, realized was important to do. And you're so right. A lot of folks are just, their activism is getting out of bed and living in a world that does not create space for trans people. And I'm hopeful, and part of all of our collective work is to change that narrative, you know, and make it so that we do have a space, and trans people have existed since time immemorial, to quote Chige Sakurai, the founder of Pronouns Day. And we have existed, you know, and been leaders in many ways because folks who've had multiple gender experiences have sometimes a lot of wisdom to offer to others about experiences in life, things that happen, situations that come up. And so, you know, if we look at many cultures, trans people were community leaders for the whole community. And I'm excited for us to return to those practices and those roots, and doing that in collaboration with the other many brilliant activists and community members that I know.
Well, thank you, Lee Blinder, the founding executive director of Trans Maryland and co-founder of the Maryland Trans Resilience Conference. Thank you for all of your great work. Thank you for making us comfortable with the uncomfortable. Thank you for your patience in educating everybody, including me. I'm sure I've made about a dozen mistakes in the course of this interview, but I appreciate your indulgence and thanks for your work.
Of course, we're all learning, and honestly, I spend quite a lot of my time unlearning. So cheers to that. And I wanted to give a brief shout out for the Maryland Trans Survey. If you're trans, please go to our social media at Trans Maryland or transmaryland.org and take our survey. The survey is about 30-40 minutes. It is open until October. And the purpose of the survey with an all trans research team is to ensure that trans people can get the resources we need. We think our community is going to grow a lot with folks fleeing some of these other states. So we want to be ready both to serve the folks who've been here and not receiving what they need, and then also our brand new Marylanders who will be arriving to us and are doing so right now.
Thank you, Lee Blinder. They are our local hero this Friday, June the 9th, during Pride Month. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next time.